In this presentation, we will begin by exploring the connection between the compensation to productive resources, more specifically labor, and the price of the goods and services produced by the firm. So first, is there a connection between the price of the product and the compensation paid for the productive resources involved in the transformation process at the firm? That's a mouthful. Anyhow, in looking at the circular flow of real economic activity, if we isolate the productive resource mix, namely labor, capital, entrepreneurship, and land, we find that the firm must pay the household to employ those resources. It's the entrepreneur's responsibility to coordinate the use of those productive resources efficiently as possible with the aim to maximize profits. As an aside, the income distribution shows us how the revenues and profits are divvied up between the household's owners of the various productive resources, including wages and benefits flowing to labor, profits flowing to the financial capital owners, debt and equity, profits to entrepreneurs or however their compensation is arranged, and rent for land, which would include natural resources and other raw materials. So when the firm sells its goods and services, included in that price are the costs associated with the productive resources employed. In a very real way, the rewards flowing to the productive resources and to the owners of those productive resources directly impacts the prices paid for those goods and services. The main driver for the prices paid for both the goods and services and the productive resources employed is competition. These are different markets, of course, when we refer to the productive resource market and the product market or goods and services market, but they both affect each other significantly. Let's take a look at our example of lug nut production in this case. Focusing on our compensation for productive resources, again in this case labor, and price associated with the good or service, let's briefly explore the concept of unit labor cost. In general, when a firm as directed by an entrepreneur employs the productive resource labor, its aim is to produce goods and services at the lowest possible cost to be sold in the product markets at the highest possible price. The degree of competition on both sides of this exchange, the productive resource market and the goods and services market, can be quite complicated. But let's keep it simple by using labor and pieces produced. Um, so when the firm sells its goods and services, again in this example lug nuts, the unit price is directly related to the cost associated with the product produced or the physical product. In this first case, the hourly compensation for labor is $20 per hour. In 1 hour, the labor employed is able to produce 100 lug nuts. In other words, the physical productivity of the labor used is 100 lug nuts per hour. The unit labor cost is 20 cents per lug nut. In the next column over, we see an increase in the productivity. The labor cost remains the same at $20 per hour, but physical product increases to 110 in that 1 hour time frame. So this increase in productivity of labor results in a unit labor cost of 18 cents per lug nut. The question is, who receives the productivity reward? Does it go to the consumer in the form of lower prices? Does it go to the owners of the productive resource mix, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, or land? Finally, in this last column, we show an increase in unit labor cost. The hourly compensation to labor increased to $22 per hour. The physical product in this case remained at 100 units. Productivity remains at 100 lug nuts per hour, while the unit labor cost rises to 22 cents per lug nut. The lesson here is very straightforward. If productivity rises, who benefits? Does the firm pass the savings on to the consumer in the form of lower prices? Does the firm compensate its employees at a higher rate? Does the firm pass on the productivity dividend? Does the firm rather pass on the productivity dividend to its productive resources, to the other productive resources rather? In short, how is the income distributed? If unit labor cost increases, is the firm able to pass the increased prices on to customers? If it is unable to pass the higher prices on to customers, how does it reduce the cost associated with the other productive resources. Competition and opportunity cost are the driving forces behind these questions. In a market system, the degree of competition dictates how equitable will be the distribution of income and how efficient the production will be coming out of the firms. So long as the productive resources receive just their opportunity cost levels of compensation, it's safe to say that equity will be closer to being achieved. Likewise, so long as sufficient competition in the product markets or the goods and services markets is present, efficiency, most goods and services produced, or efficiency meaning most goods and services produced at the lowest possible price, then again, this will also be closer to being fully realized. Finally, it's important to understand that productivity is increasingly driven by capital versus labor. Physical capital, in this case, might take the form of increased automation or some other application of technology. Where once productivity was measured in how much a person could physically accomplish or produce in a given period of time, the addition of capital in all of its forms has increased that productivity many times over in some cases. So what do we mean by derived demand? In our economic system, the demand for resources, labor, for example, debt and equity capital, entrepreneurship, is entrepreneurship and land this is all derived demand. This is all examples of derived demand. Firms hire these productive resources, including owners. Remember, normal profits are considered as a cost in economics, and their goal again is to help produce a product. As we've already seen, the more products, goods and services produce, it helps to produce within a given period of time, the greater productivity of the resource employed. The firm must then take that product and sell it on the product market in order to fetch a reward for it in terms of a price. So in turn, selling the product generates revenue, and the more valuable the product it sells and the more productive the resources, the higher the compensation to the resources. We call that reward the revenue product or the marginal revenue product. This represents the product of the worker, what they produce, or what the entrepreneur produces, or what the equity or debt capitalist produces, or at least their share of it. Again, this focuses on what a specific entity produces, not everybody else. This is then monetized by multiplying it by the price of the product.